Okay, welcome back to the Are You Strong show. I have a great guest today. I hate to say the word former, but former college quarterback, um, current business owner, author of two books, which we'll chat about in a minute. But I'm pretty excited here to welcome Alex Demczak to the show. Alex, welcome to the show, man.
Jeff, thanks for having me. And to be honest, man, I mean, coming on this show, Are You Strong? I've been a little in my head, a little intimidated. Like, am I strong enough to be on this podcast? I don't know. Are you strong? But no, man, it's an honor to
Yeah,
be here. It's been cool to get to know you, man. And you've had some studs as guests on here.
yeah.
So thanks for inviting a small guy like me on here to chat with you.
Well,
So
I'll tell you, you're probably one of the many that I'm totally excited to talk to about, but your background is phenomenal. What you're doing is outstanding. And how I found you was pretty cool. But before I get into that, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
yeah, so I live in Columbia, Missouri. I'm married with two young kids, and so when we get a full night of sleep, that is a victory. It doesn't happen too often, but yeah, live in the Midwest. I graduated from University of Missouri with a major in communication, minor in business. Played college football at Mizzou, and that's exciting right now around Columbia with the Missouri Tigers. At the time of this recording, we're ranked sixth in the country, and
You
but
want to
yeah, man.
repeat that? You want to repeat that one more time?
Yeah, I really want to brag about it. But yeah, I was in after playing college football, I was in corporate America for about 5 years and I started doing a side hustle, which was speaking. So I'd go around and I would speak on my different books. And I did that for about 4.5 years as a side hustle before I then got to the point where I then quit my full-time job, which there's a whole conversation there that I think applies to a lot of people listening of when you really decide to pursue something that you're passionate about, the doors that get opened. And so that was a big time in my life in 2021. And since then, I've been kind of living the entrepreneur, self-employed life. And so there's the ups and downs of that. But so much of it, man, comes back to the foundation of athletics. And that's why I was just intrigued to chat with you, man, because I know your background, all these people that you're interviewing with. It's really cool to see the parallels. And so, man, that's why I'm excited about our,
Yeah.
our conversation today.
Yep. And I think that we're going to go off on a bunch of tangents and it's all going to come down around athletics and what the importance of playing college sports, what it does to build you, to mold you, to help you become the person you want to be when you're done playing, you know.
Mm.
But I want to tell the world how I met you. Um, John Gordon, who's your friend and partner, in your partner in authoring a book. I met him. I don't remember how many years ago it's been now, but a long time ago. He was a speaker at our company, our parent company, Mass Mutual Financial Group. He spoke at one of our conferences, and I was instrumental, I think, anyway, getting that gig for him. And he did a phenomenal job speaking. And he's my favorite author, next to you now, right?
No, no, yeah, you don't have to say that. John's a pretty good one.
Yeah,
John is
he's good. And I've read
something
all his
else.
books. I have all his books, read them all. And when I do some speaking engagements with college programs, I give out training camp.
Wow, that's a great,
Uh,
great book,
yeah,
man.
it's a great book, and there's so many parallel in that book. Like these guys need to hear. So I bring five or six of them, and I ask some cool questions, and whoever answers it right, I give them the book. But I saw you somewhere on LinkedIn, years ago, and speaking and talking about what you were doing, and I'm like, I hit the click button and looked up your background. I'm like, this guy's pretty sharp, So then I don't know how long ago it was I reached out to you and we connected and then we talked about your books, and what you're doing and where you're growing. And now you're going to help me write my book, once I'm ready to rock and roll with it.
Hey,
And I'm really excited about that. You know,
yeah, man.
um,
Hey, you're just teasing your podcast listeners right
yeah,
now. They're getting ready, man. They're
yeah,
they're getting ready for this thing.
yeah.
So,
So it's going to be fun. So let me start grilling you with a bunch of questions, okay? So
yep.
the first one is college sports. You know, if you look at the percentage of athletes from high school that actually get there, it's very slim. But what was your driving force? Why did you choose to say, "Listen, I'm going to go to this next level"? And you didn't just play at a D3 school; you played at one of the biggest powerhouses in the country. What was the motivational factor there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. What's interesting is um when you play at these different levels, it's almost like so few people like even put themselves in the arena to try. It's almost like when you get there, you're like, wow, like so many people have been kind of they've weeded themselves out potentially. And you're like, wow, yeah, I'm here around these amazing people. But yeah, I remember when I first got there, man, I just was in my head mentally of like, wow, I don't belong here. I mean, you're next to these offensive linemen who are 6'8", and you're just like, wow, it's pretty
Monsters.
impressive. Yeah. So it was amazing. It was a really cool experience. And so for me, I thought I wanted to coach in college, and that was kind of an aspiration for me. And so today, through keynote speaking and coaching and working with companies, I do get to coach. It just looks different than what I had planned. And so I knew I wanted to coach, and um, yeah, it's kind of crazy just being part of a program of that size and the things that you learn. And man, I think the driving force was just wanting to see what it was like at the highest level. And yeah, it's like even to this day, years later, it's just like my head coach who, if you never could be late to a meeting, or you
Oh
always had to
yeah.
have your cell phone silenced. Like I
Oh
still have
yeah.
these habits today that like are with me because of the things that I learned there, and the relationships. It man, what it's like. And so I think
Yeah.
just the yeah, wanting to try to go for it and just be part of something. It was really special. And I think, yeah, looking back, it's relationships, man, that make it so special.
Oh my God. It's the team, the locker room, the camaraderie, the bus rides, the plane rides, the summer camps, the winter workouts, like all that stuff. It's like people don't understand how that connection, that bond, that you can't explain it. Can't explain
Yeah,
it, you know.
yeah, that's so true, man. So true.
So how did college sports contribute to your growth and development coming out of school to today?
It's a great question, and I want to tell a story. So during my time at Mizzou, my freshman and sophomore year, life was good. Like I had no complaints. Just like anyone listening, like when you're in the zone, you feel like, things are going good. You feel great, right? You feel unstoppable. Well, going into my junior season, I walk in to what, you have a yearly meeting with one of your position coaches. It's just kind of like if you're in corporate America, like a yearly exit interview or
Yep.
yearly check-in, whatever. And so I go into this meeting, and when I walk into the room, instead of one coach being there like there was in the past, there was three. And so I'm like, that's weird. And I walk in, about to sit down at the table, and I notice one of the coaches gets up and he closes the door behind him. And I'm thinking, in my head, I'm thinking, okay,
Uh-oh.
I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but this is not a good start. And when he sits back down, he looks right across the table and he says, Alex, I want to shoot you straight. We have over scholarshiped at quarterback. We are bringing in someone to take your spot.
Oh,
And he said it just like that. He looked right across the table and said it. And it was kind of like you could almost like hear a pin drop at that point, because in my mind's racing like, wait, what? I don't understand what you're saying. And he said, Alex, you have two options. Option number one is your cut, which in my mind, I'm thinking, is that really an option? He's like, you're cut. And option number two, he said, you can stay on the team as this volunteer assistant coach. Like we could use you, but you need to decide right now in this meeting what you want to do.
oh my
And
God.
so it was like a business transaction, right? So I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what in the world do I even say? And I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I'm confused. And so in that moment, I just kind of said what I felt compelled to say. And I said, well, all my best friends are on the team. I've given 2.5 years of blood, sweat, and tears to
Yeah.
this. And I, I guess I'll stay on as this coach, whatever that means. Right. And so the coaches stand up, they shake my hand, they walk me out of the room. And I remember walking in that hallway, I had to walk past the person who took my spot. Like I knew
Oh.
I knew who he was. He's excited. I'm obviously not. I remember going out to my truck and just parking somewhere and just crying, feeling so
Hmm.
humiliated, so like just rejected. I had all these dreams, and like now this is what my life comes to, right? And so it was a few weeks before the first practice, and I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to do, right? And I had a few weeks to kind of sulk in my thoughts, I guess. And so going into that first practice, I was like, you know what? maybe this whole coaching thing will work out. I'll be positive. So I show up, I walk in, I'm thinking, you know what? I've been with the program for 2.5 years. Maybe they're going to give me a big coaching role. Maybe they're going to put me up in the press box, let me call plays. I'll get that nice swag. I see you're
Yep.
wearing some RU swag today. So I
Yep.
have all these big ideas and thoughts. While I walk in, and one of these assistant coaches, he kind of barks at me. And he's like, Alex, I want to show you what your job's going to be. And I'm like, awesome, let's roll, right? And he walks me into this room and he hands me, and I actually have it here for people watching on video today. He hands me this yellow flag. Okay. So it's like this practice flag and it's
Is
falling
that the
apart here.
actual one?
This is the act. I brought it on here special just for your episode. Okay.
Oh my
And
God.
and so this was the actual flag. And he says, Alex, in practice, we need to work on our discipline. And so what we need you to do in practice is when someone jumps off sides, you're going to take this flag, and it's hard to do this over podcast
Throw it.
format,
Yeah.
but you're going to take this flag and you're going to throw it down. And like he threw it probably 2 feet from him. And so I'm watching him. I'm going, okay. And the worst part about the whole deal is he showed me how to do that twice. And I was like, really, bro? Like, oh man, what a rocket scientist coach you are. I'm thinking that in my head, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, I'm kind of looking around at this point, like, okay, are my buddies pranking me? What's going on? Long story short, my entire junior season, where I thought I was going up and to the right. I thought I was going to get a promotion. I got this massive demotion where I was essentially stripped of my title. Like I went from being this SEC quarterback to I'm holding up this flag now, a professional flag thrower. That's not even a real job title, right? And so my entire junior season, I'm on the sidelines. I'm in street clothes. I'm throwing this flag. And Jeff, I'll just say this, like it was the hardest year of my life.
Yeah.
But during that year, some of the relationships that were built, because I was brought lower than I ever had been, I was humbled. And, before that time, I was so busy, I didn't really make time for other people because I was doing my own thing. Well, now for the first time, I'm on the sidelines and I'm sitting, maybe sitting there next to a guy who just got hurt. And now I have time to be like, hey, bro, how are you doing? Man,
Yeah.
what are you going? I never had that time before, right?
Yeah.
So my entire junior season, I stick with it. I knew I had 1 year of eligibility left, and I told the coaches, look, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get back on the team. I'm like running sprints in street clothes with the quarterbacks at practice. I'm making practice plans, making coffee for the coaches, doing all these small things where at the time I'm thinking, I feel like an idiot. Like, what am I doing? Like, how can I add value when I don't even have a role? And it felt
Mm.
weird. It felt
Yeah.
embarrassing at times. You go on campus and people are like, "Hey, Alex, how's football going?" And I had to be like, "Well, I got cut." That's not the best pickup
Yeah.
line when you're in college, right? So
It's like your whole identity was just stripped from you.
exactly, man. My whole identity in that moment, in a moment's
Ugh.
notice, was stripped. And long story short, there's a lot more details, but for the sake of time, as I continued to work out, continued to stick with it, I got back on the team my senior year. We went to the Citrus Bowl. I was part of an awesome team there. We beat the Minnesota Gophers. It was like a really cool experience. But the reason I share that experience on this podcast is when I look back at all my years as a player, and then the 1 year where I threw that flag and I was stripped of my identity, like you said. I'm here to tell you on this podcast, I made a way bigger impact the year that I threw this flag than all of my years as a player. And so my message for this podcast and for whenever I go speak to companies is this, like leadership requires no title. Showing up and being excellent every single day in the way you carry yourself and the way that you love, serve, and care for others, like it's contagious, but it's something that it doesn't matter if you're the starting quarterback or you're way low on the bench like I was. And I think that's my message. And so I had to learn the hard way. I had to be humbled. But man, to your question, that's something that really developed me because I look back to that now and I can say, you know what? I probably wouldn't be on this podcast with you if I hadn't gone through that experience. If I
Right.
hadn't learned, because then I would have never got into speaking or writing books, and maybe we would have never connected. And so
Yeah.
it is interesting to see how, in life, when you're faced with adversity, you have a choice. Will I let this scenario define me or will I let it refine me? And I think when you have that mindset, whether it's in business, it's in sports, it allows you to be resilient and overcome challenges because Jeff, I know how successful you are in your business and what you've built, what you've accomplished. I bet you could tell us a lot of stories on this show about what you've had to overcome to
Oh
be
my
where you're.
God.
And so I think, man, that's the message, and that's something that really has shaped me in who I am today. Because
Yeah.
I was brought low, but I think sometimes when you're brought low, that's when you're able to figure out really who you're about and who's in your corner as well.
I got to ask you a question. This is just, that's a sick story, right? This whole, this whole part of this podcast is around the mental challenges we face. You know, as a former college athlete, when you're playing, you think you're invincible, especially if you're a starter. You think like, okay, you're the man. How you said before you were humbled, but I'm feeling humbled, but then it's embarrassed, right? Like how did you feel when your teammates are like, Alex, what happened?
Yeah, it was tough, and what was really even made it harder is that the person that um, I want to honor that person, but the person they brought in um, wasn't as good as me. And so that was even harder where I'd have teammates come up to me and saying, "Hey, why aren't you, why is he there?" And I didn't have an answer for it, right? And so, yeah, man, it was really hard. And it was, I think you figure out pretty quickly. It's really the little things that people, I can think back right now to things that people told me during that time, like little encouragements they gave me of, "Hey, man, I see you working," or, "Hey, stick with it."
Yeah,
Like those little comments people made to me during that time that was really challenging to me, even though I didn't really probably show it to many people. I just showed up and tried to add value. But those were the comments that I look back now and say, wow, that was really meaningful because in that moment, that helped me get through another day when
yeah,
I heard someone say those things. And, I know a lot of people, it's easy to look and say, well, are sports really that big of a thing? And wow, there's bigger issues in life. I totally agree. But as a junior in college, to your point earlier, a lot of times sports does, but just like your job can become your identity. It's who you
yeah,
are. And so then when
right,
you have a bad practice, when you get cut, all these things, it's this foundation,
yeah,
it's moved on you. And so that's my
yeah,
encouragement as well to athletes is look, your foundation is more than just your jersey. Like don't let the jersey define you. Don't let who you are as an athlete or as a business leader define you. You need to have an unmovable, unshakable foundation. And so I think that's just my message as well is like don't put so much of your identity into who you are as an athlete because there will be a day, no matter who you are,
yeah,
when that comes to an end.
yeah. Well, I've said this on all my shows, and maybe you and I chatted about it the first time we spoke, but I heard this from someone. I don't even know where. But when I heard it, I'm like, holy crap. It's athletes die twice.
Mm,
When you take what I don't care what sport you're playing, let's just say football, you take the helmet off for the last time. Now, in reality, you don't really know when that's going to be until you start counting the games when you're a
right.
senior, right? But you weren't expecting that. And somebody said, look, man, for the little league, they're putting an end to your career until you fought and fought and fought and got it back. But he so
Yeah.
so athletes die twice. Once when they take their helmet off, but the problem with that is you got to live with it for the rest of your life, even though your identity's dead, right? And then you die in real life. We all, as far as I know, we can't get out of life alive. We all move on to the next part of wherever we're going. You
Good.
know.
It's
So
good.
so can you tell me how you felt? I can't even imagine how great you felt when you made the team again. You proved all those whoever's I don't want to say anything bad wrong, right? And then you go win the Citrus Bowl. Talk about that for a second, and then talk about again. You took the helmet off again. Like
Yeah.
how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's good. I would say, yeah, coming back onto the team, obviously there was so much like excitement, just like it was a feeling of accomplishment. But I will say, to your point, I had a different perspective when I had the helmet on again. I had a different perspective of yes, being grateful, but also like there's more to life than football. And so while probably before that time I was so like this is it, well, I just lived my junior season kind of without it in some respects. And guess what? I could still have a great life. And so
Yeah,
I think that was also good for me in knowing like, all right, what's next after my senior year? I've, um, put in all this time. And so that's where I got excited about some of these now entrepreneurial type things I'm
Yeah.
pursuing, that maybe were harnessed up, because I was doing so much with athletics. And so I do think, to your point, yes, there was excitement. It was awesome. It was a really cool senior year. But I think those things they give you a different perspective to where you're able
Yeah.
to look at it differently. And I would say my senior year was different because I was grateful for the time and I made the best of every opportunity. But I'm like, you know what? Like, there's going to be great things after this
Yeah.
season too.
Yeah. Well, my next question I was going to ask you, but you've already answered it, was what was your biggest setback in your college career? Well, that sounds
Man.
like we just spent some good time on that.
Yeah, I would
Um,
definitely say it's a setback. And I think, but what's cool though, looking now to full circle, like it wasn't fun or cool at the time looking at it
right.
because it was hard, right? But now as I go and speak to companies, even like take a financial company, I had a
Yeah.
chance to speak at a financial planning firm recently, and it's like now when I go into a group of like new advisors, right, I'm able to now relate to them in a different way, or even a group of athletes that I speak to of, hey, I know what it's like to feel like you're new, you have no platform, or you've gone through something, and so I just think in these scenarios, you're really being prepared for the next thing. And
Yeah.
so, now when I go speak at a high school and someone says, hey, I'm out for the year because I tore my ACL, it's like, well, hey, you can still make an impact. It might look
Yeah.
different, but hey, I just want to encourage you. You think about Eric LeGrand, who you've had on your show, amazing guy, amazing story.
Yeah.
And from a positivity standpoint, he's someone who's just look at the difference he's making.
Right.
And it's his mindset of saying, I'm going to continue to push forward despite any adversity
Yeah.
that I'm facing.
And what's so cool about what you're doing is you're taking that experience, which most guys, Alice, I don't care who they just, I'm not doing that. I quit. Right? Come on, as well as egos, they transfer, they're out of here, they're gonna cry, whatever. I'm out. You said I'm sticking in, I'll do whatever I gotta do. And that moment of your life made you who you are today. And you
Mhm.
have no shame, none, zero, of going out there and telling the world about what you had to deal with, and because of what you had to deal with, it's who you are now.
Yeah, that's a great encouragement because about a year or two after, yeah, I honestly didn't share it much because I still felt a little weird, like, oh man, that do I really want to tell people I got cut?
Yeah,
But the interesting thing is, as I started getting into speaking, as I shared it for the first time, what I noticed is, whoa, like now two or three people came up to me afterwards and said, hey, let me tell you about a time that I
yeah,
fill in the blank, whether it's them getting cut or them going through it. And what's funny is you go and you share principles about
yeah,
your in your book, but then a lot of times people will come up to you afterwards and talk about the stories you shared. And
yeah,
that's the reality is everyone has a story. And I
yeah,
think that's what's been fun about it is to yes, it was hard in the moment, and at times it still feels a little. I have to fight against that resistance of like, yeah, it's not like the most like I don't get to like brag and say I won the Super Bowl. It's like, no, I got cut. But again, you're right. It's part of my story and what I've been given, and so my responsibility is to steward what I've been given and not
right,
run from it, share it because that's going to help people. And so that's my encouragement. Yeah, whether it's you and you sharing your book, which I'm excited about, or other people listening, it's like you have a
yeah,
story, a unique perspective, and a gifting and a skill set that you can speak to.
yeah,
And I think it's almost like this. It's like if you knew someone was sick and you had a pill that could help their sickness, you could cure them. You would never, especially if it's someone you love, or really anyone in that case, you would never withhold that medicine or that pill from them, right? You
yeah,
would never say, I'm not going to
no,
give it to them. No, you would say, here, take this pill. It's going to
take it,
help
yeah,
you. In the same way, man, I think we have stories, experiences, perspectives that we can do the same thing for people. We can encourage them, and sometimes sharing our things that have been tough. I heard a quote that said, people they are impressed by your highlights, but they resonate with your weaknesses. And I think it's so
mm,
true. As athletes, it's easy to be like, oh, I'm gonna act tough or whatever. But when you really get through to someone, when there's breakthrough, it's when you're showing who you really are and you're genuine and you're real and you're human to human just sharing and that would be my encouragement too for anyone listening as you go around if you ever get the chance to speak I speak full time, do about 50 speaking engagements a year, and you know don't be afraid to share your story because
yeah,
you never know how it can land with people and how it can help people. Maybe someone's in that audience or whatever your platform is. Maybe it's social media. someone that you know might have a limiting belief about themselves. They might have a discouragement, a doubt, but you stepping out in faith and sharing your perspective, you just never know how that can help them. And I think that's my challenge and my encouragement to the listeners today is what can you do to share your story and elevate other people? Because man, right now, especially in 2024, we're entering a political environment
Oh,
and there's all this adversity and debates and all these things. But the question is, what will you do to connect people, to
yeah.
encourage people, to love, serve, and care? And I think when you focus on those things, all the other news and all that, it doesn't really get to you as much because you're so busy making an impact on other people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is so on point, Alex. And I want everybody who's listening, could you say I speak to this? I'm speaking. I want these people to understand that if it wasn't for that yellow flag that you just showed, for those who didn't see it because they're listening, it's like the penalty flag, right? The penalty in the NFL.
Yeah, it's
If it
like, yep.
wasn't for that moment in your life, all these things you're doing now may have never happened. And just think though, your adversity, whatever, all the thing that just mounted and mounted and mounted, where most people would have quit. Just think of how many people you personally have impacted from all the speaking engagements that you've done, the books that you've written, the people that have read them. It's like, holy smokes,
Wow, man.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, that means a lot for you to say that. And I've never, yeah, I probably don't take the time to think about that enough, but you're right. And I
it's
think that,
huge,
yeah, I think that is the challenge is like how do you move past these moments of like the why me mentality or the oh
right?
poor me, and if you can shift your focus on like, you know what, I'm gonna find a way through this, and there's other people that can be encouraged, that could be helped by this. Yeah, who are you? If you have something that can help people, who are you not to share it? And
Yeah,
I think if you navigate out of that mindset, it is you can see some real change happen
yeah,
and it's really cool. And it's even sometimes it's the little things. It's a little email that you'll get of someone that says, "Hey, I read a book or I read your blog or whatever," and it's hey, it really helped me in my
yeah.
mindset. It's like, but you think in the moment, okay, should I do this email newsletter? Should I do this post? And then you do it and someone reaches out. And so, man, I think that's why I like talking with people like you because you're doing the same thing. I follow you and see your content you're putting out. And so, yeah, I think it's hard in the moment, but being able to look back is just
It's
is a
so
cool
cool.
thought.
It's so
Yeah.
cool. Then you would have never met John, right? You never would have done the great things you're doing with him, and it's just so cool how that has just like the tentacles keep going,
Yeah, man.
you
Yeah,
know?
and as a person of faith, I believe that, I feel like God positions you to, he refines you, he sharpens you. But yeah, when I look back at kind of my story and who I am, and I think I'm sure anyone listening could say the same thing about their lives, it's like it is interesting to see how you're prepared in each season. You're
Yeah.
refined for the next one. So man, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy to look back.
So let's talk about your identity now, Alex. It sometimes for many people, we got the glory days, Bruce Springsteen song, it was, hey, we're going back to whatever. And I get together with my buddies, and we talk about 40 years ago and imagine we're still playing the game and all this kind of stuff. But let's talk about your identity now. If you were able to, put in a sentence, words, descriptions, paragraph, what is your identity like now?
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, that's a great question. I feel like I know I just kind of said it. I mean, I feel like I don't know if I can really answer that without kind of giving away that, my faith is in Christ and who I am as, God's son. And I feel like that's for me, and I know not everyone listening might not believe that, but for me, that's something that's unshakable. And that's something that can't be changed because of circumstance. That is something that can't be altered or ever taken away. And so for me, and my personal conviction and belief is that that's what it is. And so because of that, looking through that lens and knowing that to be true, that impacts everything. And so now even in business, I don't have to have fear. I don't have to have, to worry about, oh, will this work out or will that, because what I choose to believe is that, I can trust in God, and that I'm giving these scenarios to God. I'm taking it off of myself and say, God, I choose to trust you. Like in those moments of getting cut, it's like, God, I choose to trust you. And that's now, that is my identity, who I am in Christ. And so, yeah, I think, I don't know if you were expecting me to go there with it on your show,
No,
but
no, I don't. You can go wherever you want to go.
yeah, I just don't think I can answer that question without saying that, because
Yeah,
truly,
good.
like, yeah, that is kind of an unshakable foundation for me. And so whatever I go into, whatever I do now, it's with this lens of, how can I just trust in God through these trials? Because guess what I experienced in college will not be the last time I experienced trials, and we're all going to go through trials,
Yeah.
and life is hard. So yeah, man, I appreciate the question. And I think yeah, if people wanted to connect more about that, feel free to reach out to me. But I think I think in the process of maturing and growing, um, yeah, without that, like without that unshakable um foundation,
Yeah.
I would think a lot of people without that would it would be tough. And I would think
Yeah.
there would be a lot of insecurity, mental health, doubt, fear, frustration, confusion. I feel like yeah, I feel for those individuals, and I think without that, there would definitely be a void. And
Well,
so,
well, you used the word, Alex, foundation, right?
mm,
So many people, whatever it might be, right? They don't
right.
have a foundation. They can't find it, and they're all over the place. And they need that guiding light, that person, that purpose, that faith to get them to wherever they're going to go.
Mm,
And many times when an athlete loses their identity, they're on this search.
yes.
And many of them can't find it. They're just searching forever. And they're almost like lost, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Which is
100%.
so to that point, my next question is like for these guys, girls coming out of athletics, they're into the professional world now. What kind of advice can you give them, to help prepare them for the corporate, professional, entrepreneurial life when the playing days are just done?
Yeah. Well, I think you could probably resonate with this as former athletes. What I've found is when you take the mentality of who you were as an athlete and the discipline, the structure, the routine, and you harness those things and put that energy towards whatever it is that you do. I don't care if you're financial planning or you're speaking. When you do that, it is noticeable. And I remember my
Mm.
first ever corporate job I stepped into, like the first one of the first days I was there, I heard these individuals kind of like complaining about the hours, or they were complaining about like, oh man, it's crazy. You have to kind of get here early and kind of stay late some days. And I
Yeah, yeah,
remember thinking to myself, I don't think I said anything to him. I was just in my mind like, how in the world, like I've been programmed because of Division I college athletics that like it's kind of your life. It's kind of part of everything you do is
yeah,
football.
yeah.
And
Bring it.
so then I got into corporate, and they're like, okay, shoot, okay, it's almost 5 p.m. When can we leave? And I was just like, wow, this is an adjustment. And so pretty quickly in sales, I did find it easier to have success, because it was like, well, I just did what I mentally did in football and took that same approach to
Yeah,
sales.
yeah,
And I think it could be anything, and I'm sure you've seen that too. So I think that would be my encouragement for someone who, if you're an athlete or you are a former athlete, kind of in this identity crisis, in this area where you're like, what am I going to do next? Well, think about all the passion, when you did the workouts the way you used to do them, all that stuff. How can you get back to some of that, some of those routines, those disciplines, those habits, and then just channel it, cultivate a love, find things that take a step in the direction of what you can cultivate and love in what you do. Because I don't think you just wake up one day and automatically love necessarily the job that you're in. But I think, you know, I don't know if I like love, I mean, I guess I love books, but I think over time, as I could see, okay, I'm seeing people that are impacted by books. Books can change lives. I can see how a story resonates. So guess what? Now I want to help people share their story in a book. And so I think you just cultivate over time as you move in that direction. And so that would be my encouragement
yeah,
is, if you're bummed, like, oh, my identity was in sports and now I'm at this random job I don't like, it's like, okay, well, then how can you take one step in a direction that you're like, you know what, this feels more like me? And I think a lot of people get stuck because they're not willing to take a step. Well, guess what? My step was for 4.5 years, I had a side hustle. I didn't just wake up one day in corporate and say, you know what, to my wife, Erin, and we had a child and 2 mortgage payments. I didn't say, hey, babe, today I'm going to quit my job and I have no plan,
And
right?
we'll figure it out.
And we'll figure it out. Like, I'm not saying that couldn't work for your listeners, but I'm
It's
saying
difficult.
that was difficult, right? And so instead, what I did is I said, hey, for 4.5 years, I'm going to grind on this side hustle and the off hours. And I had an awesome employer he said, hey, we love what you're doing with the speaking. Keep doing it as long as you keep doing your thing here. And so I honored my work obligations, and I was in the mortgage industry. And then I did speaking. And so it got to a point where I was able to then show my wife and say, hey, look, this is income wise what speaking looks like, and it started to inch closer to what I was making in corporate, and then it started becoming more. And so my message to people is, take baby steps. Like Dave Ramsey
Yeah.
always talks about baby steps or whatever, and it's like, what are the things you can do to take a small step in that direction, so that you might look up after 2 years of doing that and say, whoa, like I can really take a run at this. Like, that's why I love you did this podcast. It's like,
Yeah.
you start somewhere, and then you look up a year later and you've done, however long you've done, 40 podcasts, you've done 100, and it just starts growing from there.
Yeah. I think it comes down to everything you said plus one extra word is attitude, right?
That's
Is man, attitude's everything. You know what I mean? And if you don't bring the attitude, like all of John's books, it's all about attitude, right? Like
yeah.
the energy bus. I mean, it's so crazy that book when I read it, I'm reading through it, and at the end I find out it's him. I'm like, that was like, whoa, but
Yeah.
it's your attitude and what you bring to the table. But like you said, the mental discipline, the structure, the routine, the passion as an athlete, if you bring it to your career, you're going to get the same type of result. If you're doing, like you said, what time, how late can I get in? How early can I go home? What's less
Right.
work can I do? Like, that's never going to work,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly. Exactly.
That is cool, So, okay, post athletic world, you're working, you're building your business, you're doing all kinds of cool stuff outside of your wife and your children, because I know that's going to be your answer, but I'm going to take that answer and put it on the side because it's every parent's, spouse's answer. But what's your proudest achievement post athletics?
That's good. Proudest achievement.
It's hard when you take your family out of it, right?
Yeah, when you take your family out, it's hard. Yeah, I would just say, this is kind of a different answer, but lately I've been really into, like, what would it look like to have wise counsel and to have people in your corner. And so every other Friday morning, in my neighborhood, I go on a walk with a 73-year-old guy named Larry, and me, him, and another person, and he just mentors us, and we just talk about life. And so I guess that's an accomplishment. I just think it's literally 5 a.m. though. So the reason why I do that is because we're all busy, and it's like, look, at 5 a.m. in the morning, there usually isn't an excuse to. I can't be like, hey, I have this other meeting. It's 5
Yeah.
a.m.
Yeah.
It's either sleep or it's you're here. So that's been a pretty cool accomplishment lately, in the sense of, I feel like, this is someone who's a lot older than me, who's lived a lot of life, and yeah, I just think it's cool to think about what I've learned from that, and like what will come from that, and just trying to say, look, I don't have it all figured out when it comes to business stuff, when it comes to all these different things, and it's been really cool. And one of my other buddies, who's a college football coach, he does it with us. His name's Lee, and I don't know, that feels like an accomplishment, because it's like, I know from like a monetary value, maybe it's not, oh, I didn't build this big business, but it's to me, it's like, I've heard this quote. It's like, you should care more, you should be more concerned that the people who know you the best respect you the most. And I know you said you can't answer family, so this kind of ties into that. But at the end of my life, when I think about it like that, who do I want to really respect me? Well, it's the people who actually know me the best. It's my family, it's the people like that, close friends, who they know me, and even with knowing me, they admire, respect the way that I treat them, love them, whatever. And so I think, yeah, man, I think that feels like an accomplishment, because I think a lot of times, to your point earlier, you are, younger. I'm 32 now, which feels like an old guy,
Oh
but
yeah. Oh man.
growing up growing up in the 20s and 30s, it can be, you try these new things, or it's different. You're not on a team with 100 people like you were in college. You're on your own now. And
Yeah.
so I think it is a win for me to think about bringing people into my life who serve as wise counsel, who encourage me, who will tell me the truth too,
Yeah.
and will be honest, and they won't shy away from it. So that feels like a win. Um,
That's cool. Love that.
yeah.
So let's tell everybody, what do you tell people? Tell people what you're doing now, your books, your company, how can they get a hold of you, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, man. So I appreciate that. So my latest book with John Gordon is called The Sale, and it's a story about leading with integrity. And so that's a big part of my message when I go speak to companies or teams is team building and building. What would it look like to work in your job and lead in a way that when you look back on your career, there's no regret. And so that's a big part of my message. And so when I'm not speaking and traveling to do that, I'm the CEO of Streamline Books, and we help people write and publish their book. Again, spoiler alert for all the podcast listeners out there. When Jeff's ready, we'll get his going. So
Yep.
we'll make sure to get that out to all of you listeners. And maybe Jeff, maybe you'll give all your listeners a discount to buy your book. With that, to be determined. To be determined. But
I'll give half of them the book.
hey, folks, you heard it here. If you're listening and you shoot Jeff an email, he'll get you on a list. Maybe he'll give you, I don't know, maybe he'll give
Yeah.
you a free copy. But yeah, I think that's been a huge passion of mine, Jeff, is to be able to meet people like you and help you share your story. And yeah, man. So between those two things, it definitely feels busy at times, but it's different than when I was in my corporate job. And again, a lot of corporate jobs are great, but this corporate job I had, it didn't really align with like what I wanted to do. And so this feels different, that even though when it's busy, it's a good busy, and it lines up with my kind of what I'm passionate about. So yeah, and people can connect with me. alexspeaking.com is my website. And then if anyone listening wants to share their story, you can go to writemybooks.com, and our team would love to connect with you and just talk about your story and how we can help you share your story with the world.
Yeah.
So
It's I'm excited to do mine, and all the people that are the guests on this show are going to be part of it, and the impact that we're going to make is going to be huge. But how about your speaking engagements? Talk about those.
yeah, man. So like I said, I usually will do around 50 in a year. I don't ever want to exceed that. And so I try to cap it just to
That's a
be
lot.
with
That's
family. Yeah,
right.
it can be a lot. Yeah. So some years are a little less, some years are, I did more when I first started, but now I would say 50 or less. Trying to be more selective. But yeah, I would say, man, I love speaking with companies, with organizations. A lot of companies will have a quarterly speaker or things like that. And so yeah, I would say on the speaking side, I love taking that. I guess the way I'd say it is because, we're talking about sports, it kind of gives me that performance that sports gave me, in the sense of, you prepare for a speaking engagement, you get to know the client, you get to know what they need, what their challenges, what are their pain points, and then you get to go actually deliver it and try to have a message that lands with the employees or the team members that will drive them to some kind of action. And so I think for me, it's a fun challenge because I mean, if we're being honest, we've all been part of events or things where there's like a really boring speaker, and everyone's like, all right, when's this speaker going to be done? And so as a millennial, my worst fear is that, anyone would ever say that about me. And so my challenge to myself and is just to try to be funny, have a good time, have it be something that's lighthearted, that's fun, but it's also actionable that people leave and say, wow, you know what? I want to be introspective about these different parts of my life and my leadership. And so yeah, that's what I try to do, man, when I go out and I just try to have fun with it. But um, yeah, that's a little bit about what I do.
So I got to ask you a question and you might not want to answer this one just because you don't want anybody to say, hey, how come they didn't pick me? Like, what's been your favorite experience in speaking? Where was it? Who are you speaking to? And like, man, if I could just duplicate that a million times, I'd be loving it.
That's a great question. Yeah, because you're right. All of them are great. But there's a company called USI Insurance, and they're an awesome company, great values, great leadership, and their vice president, Rayanne Budry, she read the sale and she said, "Hey, we need to bring this message to all of our team members." So I think they got close to 500 copies of the book, and
Oh,
this was
wow.
really cool. day one was at Lambeau Field. Day
No.
two was at the Milwaukee Brewers Stadium. So it was like in a
Wow.
suite.
How many
So it was,
people were there?
well, it was, so yeah, I probably made it sound better than it is. It wasn't like at the stadium, it was in a suite at the stadium. So
Yeah,
it was, but it was really cool. It was probably a few hundred at each group. And so we all got behind the scenes tours and all that. But
that's beautiful.
it was a really cool group. So yeah, anytime I can do that at like a professional sports venue, I mean, that's super fun. So I would say that's probably one of my favorites. Um, One time I spoke in a barn to a group of farmers with my buddy. He was a comedian, Brad Ellis. So he did a little comedy and I spoke. And so that was a fun, interesting, as you can imagine, environment. But yeah, you never know where you're going to go as a speaker next. That's what's interesting is you never know.
Yeah.
So
And so I'm gonna guess you're a Packers fan.
I'm not. It was just cool to go to NFL Stadium. Yeah, I grew up a Rams fan, but now the
Okay.
Rams got shipped out, so now I live 2 hours from the Chiefs. So, I guess they're an okay team to root for, being 2 hours from Kansas City. So not a
So
too
why do
bad
you
of a
change?
team.
Why do you change your team just because they moved away?
Well, around here in mid-Missouri, there's a lot of kind of not great feelings. The owner of the Rams, he actually has a house here, and so a lot of people are not super thrilled that he took the team away from us.
Okay.
So I think I think it was tough to root for a team that went across the country. And so now like the Chiefs are kind of the hometown team outside of Mizzou football here. So, and they're winning a lot of games,
Yeah,
obviously
it's
the
kind
last
of
few
hard.
years. So it's a little funner to watch probably as well. But the Rams are
Well,
good too. But yeah,
listen, we're for an essence of time. I got to ask you one more question. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that you think we should chat about before we wrap up the show?
man, it's a great question. I think my just last challenge to anyone listening would just be, what is your unique message? What is the platform that you have? Because we all have a platform. It could be your family, it could be your classroom if you're a teacher, it could be anything. What is your platform that you have, and are you being diligent? Are you being a good steward of what you've been given to make an impact on other people's lives? And I think it's so easy in today's society to be so me focused, where with social media, with comparison. I love this quote, Teddy Roosevelt. It's comparison is the thief of joy. And so every time as a leader, when you look around negatively to other people, you're actually robbing yourself of joy. And when you think about how blessed we all are, if you're listening to this podcast, you have a cell phone, you're one of the top wealth earners in the world, right? Just from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah,
And so I think my lasting message would just be, you are blessed to be a blessing. And I think when you navigate out of that mindset, it changes the way you work, the way that you perform at your job, and the way you lead, and the way that you live. And so that would be my message. You are
that's cool.
blessed to be a
A
blessing.
blessing. That is awesome. And that and are you being diligent at impacting other people's lives? I mean, that's your life, you
Yeah.
know? And if it wasn't for, did you ever thank your head coach who cut you?
I was actually at an event with him recently. Yeah, so it's fun to talk stories and talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it was like his lowly assistant coaches who made that decision. It was, he wasn't dealing with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm definitely grateful to him. And I guess you could say it that way. I guess I'm grateful for that. So
You
yeah.
got to put it in your book.
Yeah, exactly. So
Your next
uh
book, your next book.
yes.
Well, Alex, listen, man, I really appreciate you being on here. I enjoy watching all the stuff you post out there. I get your newsletter. Maybe you want to let everybody know how they can get your newsletter real quick.
Yeah, it's called Focus Friday. Every Friday morning, I just send out an encouragement. And yeah, if you go to alexspeaking.com, you can subscribe to it. So it's called Focus
Yeah,
Friday.
it's a great piece. I get it every Friday, and it just keeps your mind straight, and that's half of the battle, but
Yeah.
enjoy the weekend. I'm looking forward to getting the book going. We're gonna have a lot of fun doing that, and I'm hoping that I can make as much of an impact as you've been doing. You know, and
Oh
I,
man.
and, you
Hey,
know,
hey, hey, yours is gonna be a lot bigger, man. So now that you got this podcast rolling, you got all kinds of stuff happening. So man, no, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's been really cool to get to see the impact that you're having. So keep it up, man. And
yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate that. See you soon.